Hello all. So today we are talking about carbohydrate loading. This is part 4 of chapter 4. Here we go. Carbohydrate loading, also known as glycogen loading or glycogen supercompensation, is a nutritional strategy used by athletes to maximize their glycogen stores in muscles and liver. This is just an overview. So the purpose of carbohydrate loading is to increase glycogen stores. So by consuming a high carbohydrate diet, athletes can store more glycogen than usual in their muscles and liver, and to delay fatigue. Enhanced glycogen stores help athletes perform better and delay fatigue during prolonged or intense exercise sessions, especially in endurance events. So the process really, if you want to look at duration, you typically implement it over a period of 3 to 7 days leading up to a major athletic competition or event. Athletes increase their carbohydrate intake significantly during that period of time. Recommendations often suggest consuming around 8 to 10 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight per day. That high intake is necessary to fully saturate glycogen stores. And exercise taping. So athletes may reduce their training volume or taper while maintaining intensity to facilitate glycogen storage without depleting it through exercise. Carbohydrate loading is particularly beneficial for athletes who engage in activities that require sustained high levels of energy expenditure over prolonged periods. So looking at the energy demands of the activity, these athletes require substantial glycogen stores to sustain prolonged periods of exercise. As far as benefits, carbohydrate loading helps delay the onset of fatigue and maintain intensity and improve overall performance during extended competitions or training sessions. It's also about optimizing energy availability. So by maximizing glycogen stores through loading, athletes can ensure they have adequate energy reserves to meet the demands of their sport without experiencing premature fatigue. So athletes specifically are long distance runners, swimmers, bicyclists, triathletes, and cross-country skiers. The classic carbohydrate loading technique traditionally involved a specific protocol to maximize glycogen stores in preparation for endurance events. So this is how it typically worked. You go through first a depletion phase. So with this, it involved, again, several days of high intensity training or a combination of prolonged exercise and a low carbohydrate diet. The goal was to reduce glycogen stores significantly to enhance the subsequent supercompensation effect when carbohydrates were reintroduced. After the depletion phase, athletes would switch to a high carbohydrate diet. This phase usually lasted 3 to 7 days before the competition. Carbohydrate intake during that phase was typically around 8 to 10 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. For example, a 70 kilogram athlete might consume, which would be about 145, something like that, pounds, might consume 560 to 700 grams of carbohydrates daily. The emphasis was on consuming complex carbohydrates to maximize glycogen storage in muscles and liver. And concurrently with carbohydrate loading, athletes would reduce their training volume. So tapering, that tapering period usually lasted about 1 to 2 days before the event. The reduced exercise volume allowed muscles to rest and further enhance glycogen storage without depleting it again. Again, benefits are maximized glycogen stores, where the muscles store more glycogen than usual, enhancing endurance performance. That improved endurance with higher glycogen stores, athletes could delay fatigue during prolonged exercise, potentially improving performance in endurance events. The challenge is, of course, the practicality of it all. It requires precise timing of exercise and diet, which could be challenging to implement effectively. and individual variability. Athletes may respond differently to the depletion phase and loading protocols requiring adjustments based on personal metabolism and training status. There are several methods of carbohydrate loading that have been developed to achieve similar results with fewer drawbacks. And so here are some different methods of carbohydrate loading, which include the classical method. A modified method that you see here, or the recommended method, is one that involves a less drastic approach to carbohydrate loading compared to the classic method. It includes a shorter depletion phase and a gradual increase in carbohydrate intake. So day 1 to 3, you perform moderate exercise and consume a mixed diet of moderate carbohydrate intake, which is about 50 to 55% of your total calories. Days 4 and 6 through 6, reduce exercise intensity and increase carbohydrate intake to about 70% of total calories. There are a few other methods as well. The Western Australia method is one that was developed by researchers at the University of Western Australia, in which they aim to achieve glycogen supercompensation in just 1 day. The 6-day method is one that it is a variation of the modified method and spreads the carbohydrate loading over a longer period without a severe depletion phase. And then a rapid carbohydrate loading, which involves a very brief period of intense exercise followed by a short period of high carbohydrate intake. And then lastly, the low residue diet method. That is really, the approach is focused on consuming easily digestible carbohydrates to minimize gastrointestinal discomfort while maximizing glycogen storage. Some key considerations are hydration, and the adequate fluid is crucial during carbohydrate loading because glycogen storage also increases water retention. And then different individual variations, so different athletes may respond differently to carbohydrate loading strategies, and so it's important to experiment during training to determine which method works best. And gastrointestinal comfort is really important, so athletes should consider their tolerance to high carbohydrate intake and choose foods that minimize gastrointestinal discomfort. Each of those methods offer a different approach to maximizing glycogen stores without the extreme depletion phase of the classic method. And athletes can choose the method that fits best their training schedules and personal preferences. Table 410 here represents a general dietary plan for carbohydrate loading. So you can see what your dietary sources of fat, protein, and carbohydrates should look like, the amount, the kcal, and the types of foods that you should be taking in. Carbohydrate loading is known to significantly increase muscle glycogen concentration, which is crucial for athletes in prolonged endurance activities. You'll see an increase in muscle glycogen levels, and studies have reported this. The increase occurs when athletes consume sufficient energy and carbohydrates during the loading phase. Both male and female athletes experience increased glycogen levels with proper adherence to carbohydrate loading protocols. And gender does not necessarily appear to significantly affect the effectiveness of carbohydrate loading in increasing muscle glycogen stores. As far as the magnitude of increase, muscle glycogen levels can typically increase by 2 to 3 times above normal levels after a carbohydrate loading regimen. And liver glycogen levels may also double, although they do not increase to the same extent as muscle glycogen. And so you really have to, again, experiment with the protocol during training to see what works best for the athlete that you're working with. So, and monitoring changes in body weight can be one indicator of increased glycogen stores in muscles. So water binds the glycogen. Approximately 3 grams of water bind to each gram of stored glycogen in the muscle. That means that for every gram of glycogen stored, there's an additional 3 grams of water are stored along with it. So it is possible to see a weight increase if you have successfully increased your muscle glycogen stores. For instance, if you stored an additional 300 to 400 grams of glycogen, which equates to about 900 to 1200 grams of water, you might see a total weight gain of approximately 1.2 to 1.6 kilograms, or 2.5 to 3.5 pounds above your normal weight. So to monitor, you want to weigh yourself under consistent conditions, same time of day, same clothing or lack thereof, as most of us do, and track changes in your body weight over time, especially before and after carbohydrate loading phases. Note that factors like hydration status, diet changes, and exercise intensity can also influence daily weight fluctuations. So look for trends over several days rather than focusing on daily changes. And then the confirmation through performance. Improved performance and sustained energy levels during exercise can also indicate that the muscle glycogen stores have increased. Athletes often experience enhanced performance in endurance activities after effective carbohydrate loading, which correlates with increased glycogen availability. Carbohydrate loading is primarily beneficial for athletes engaged in prolonged high-intensity exercise rather than short duration tasks. And again, a lot of that's due to the enhanced glycogen stores so that is readily available as an energy source during exercise. It is particularly beneficial for athletes that are engaging in prolonged, continuous, but could also be intermittent high-intensity exercise. It is important for delaying fatigue during those endurance activities. And athletes can maintain a higher intensity of exercise for a longer period of time before experiencing depletion of muscle glycogen. With sufficient glycogen stores, athletes can sustain their optimal pace for a longer duration. And again, it's crucial in sports like marathon running, cycling, swimming, and other endurance type events. The additional water bound to glycogen can help maintain hydration and thermoregulation during exercise in hot conditions. That will aid in preventing dehydration and maintaining performance in challenging environments. So for maximal benefit, athletes often combine carbohydrate loading with consuming carbohydrates during prolonged events. And that strategy ensures continuous energy availability and supports sustained performance throughout the event. Carbohydrate loading, while generally beneficial for enhancing performance in endurance events, can have potential drawbacks and considerations. And one of those we talked about was increased body weight. So the additional glycogen stored in muscles and liver is bound with water, which can lead to temporary weight gain of about 2.5 to 3.5 pounds. That extra weight may be a disadvantage for sports like running, where weight can affect speed and efficiency. However, the increased energy supply from glycogen can often offset the slight weight gain during performance. For individuals with diabetes, they should consult their healthcare professional before engaging in carbohydrate loading. And you want to monitor blood glucose levels closely to manage carbohydrate intake effectively and maintain stable blood sugar levels during and after loading for those who are diabetic. As far as choices of carbohydrates, you want to opt for low glycemic index foods, which are more healthful for individuals. That low GI food leads to slower and more stable increases in blood glucose levels compared to the high GI foods, so more vegetables and things along that line, which can help manage energy levels more effectively during exercise. As far as gastrointestinal distress, consuming high amounts of simple sugars, especially in concentrated forms like sports drinks or gels, may cause gastrointestinal distress in some athletes. That can manifest as bloating, cramping, or diarrhea, particularly during exercise. So, in summary, carbohydrate loading is not necessarily a technique for all types of athletes, but it may benefit athletes that are involved in long-distance competitions, such as marathoning or even ultra-marathoning that we have nowadays. Various carbohydrate loading techniques may effectively increase muscle glycogen stores, but tapering exercise or rest and a high carbohydrate diet are the essential points. During prolonged endurance exercise, the efficacy of carbohydrate loading is enhanced by exogenous carbohydrate consumption. And that is all that I have for you today. We will pick this back up where we'll be talking more about carbohydrates in our it'll be part 5. All right, you have a great day. I'll talk with you soon.